Hello, everyone. Welcome back. I'm Dr. Dave, and this is my podcast. In this podcast season, I'm interviewing the editors and authors of our latest book, Death Worlds to Life Worlds, Collaboration with Strangers for Personal, Social, and Ecological Transformation. Today, I have joining me Dr. Jennifer Decker. Dr. Decker completed her research work at Fielding Graduate University in Santa Barbara, California. There, she explored how middle-aged women view their own bodies vis-a-vis a multitude of persistent cultural demands on women, imposing notions of the ideal body type. This complicated and pernicious issue often presents a stumbling block, preventing the happiness and well-being of many. Please welcome with me Dr. Jennifer Decker.
Thank you, Dr. Dave. It's great to be here with you.
Thanks. I appreciate you taking the time for this. Jennifer, you co-authored a chapter titled Overcoming Death Worlds of Addiction, Self-Injury, and Stress. In it, you deal with some very deep personal issues for women concerning their body image. One notion central to your work is that of socially imposed relevances, as in women who are perceived as younger possessing higher social standing. Would you expand on these two concepts, please? What is a socially imposed relevance, and how does the sweeping cultural preference for younger, more attractive women translate into social pressure?
Yes, of course. An imposed relevance is something that is imposed on the individual that they have no control over, such as COVID, our current pandemic, a birth defect, or even aging. My discussion of socially imposed relevances have to do with our society telling women that they need to appear or be a certain way. So as women age, they may become less physically attractive, and their social place shifts, in turn impacting their sense of identity. For example, some women identify as being young, attractive, and fit, which is one thing I found with my research. So ultimately, when they lose those qualities, they're treated differently by society, and they must come to terms with their new state of being in the world.
Thank you. I'm going to just pause for a moment and let that sink in. You and I are familiar with many of these terms, but perhaps many in our audience are not. And so I'd like to give them a moment to perhaps even rewind a bit and listen to that answer again. It was very succinct. I appreciate that. Now, in your work, you identified self-imposed elements leading to death worlds. Among them, well, you've already mentioned identity, which is critical, but you also brought out the notion of belonging. How does the drive to belong affect a middle-aged woman's treatment of her own body?
Yes, so I discussed the notion of conforming to socially constructed body image ideals. Often people desire to conform as a way to belong. And in my continued work, I have found that belonging ranks very high for middle-aged women who are more likely to pursue risky body corrective measures, such as cosmetic surgery, intense exercise, and extreme dieting. My dissertation work determined belonging to be a key theme. And Dolezal, a feminine scholar and phenomenologist, goes as far as to say that for women, physical pain and discomfort is preferable to shame. Shame, she argues, or that women's fear of shame is a powerful, very powerful driving force capable of causing some women to jeopardize their health and safety. So this idea of shame, or being an outcast in society because of women's aging bodies, is a pretty profound driving force.
As you speak of this, I think of the pain you're describing, two different sources of pain. One is external, it's from society, the pain of shaming. And the other pain that I hear you describing is internal, it's self-imposed, it's physical pain from overexertion. Am I right in
Yes.
identifying these two?
Yes, that is correct. There are definitely both internal and external factors in this phenomenon. So it's definitely the pressure from society and our cultural ideals, as well as women's internal dialogue about how they don't live up to those, or how they want to, their desire to live up to those.
Uh, let's move on to another question. Toward the end of your chapter, you say, a transformation of thought, one in which women put their own well-being first, would allow them to move from a death world to a life world. My question is, if women feel such great social pressure to conform to some arbitrary external standard of the ideal body image, what steps can be taken that might allow them to overcome the pressure long enough to recognize what true well-being is?
So, teaching women to reframe their perspective about their bodies and the importance of the body, I think, is critical. Um, a major theme that emerged through this work, particularly as I extended my work on this phenomenon in my dissertation, was the difference between a body for self versus a body for others. When one views their body as something for themselves, they are more likely to nourish it and care for it. However, when one views their body as something for others, they are more likely to engage in self-punishment and deprivation in order to please the other. So reframing it so that there's a mindset of nourishment instead of deprivation is more likely to lead women to optimal health and a comfortable body image.
All right, that's very good. This is very clear. Now, I wonder if I might just go a little bit deeper into that question.
Mhm.
What steps could someone listening to this podcast, what steps could she take to reframe? It's one thing to say that you have one frame where you're living for others, the other where you're living for yourself. How do you actually do that?
Yeah, so this is something that it does take time. It's like when you're establishing a habit. I think that one of the first and easiest steps is to each time you think about, when you're making a behavior, you're doing something like eating something, you think, well, what I'm eating, how is this nourishing my body? And if it is, then going for it. For example, I look at I mean, this is a complex issue, trying to reframe women's behaviors, particularly when it comes to dieting and exercise. I think we are taught that we need to not eat something so that we look better, right? So a lot of people, I've had clients who tell me that they cannot eat fruit because they think it's going to make them gain weight. I've had clients extreme say they can't have carrots because they're higher in sugar. Clearly, those are not the reasons that women are heavier, have more body fat. Uh, so teaching women to be more self-reflective, to look at it and say, well, why am I taking this in? Is this going to nourish me? Um, and if it, I think that reframing it in that way is one first step in looking at it from a mindset of nourishment.
I agree. And I hear the complexity in that answer because when I hear dieting and choosing what to eat and combining that notion with how others view me based on what I eat, I'm not sure I can make all the connections that would lead me to success. And I'm a man. I'm not subject as much to the pressures of women. So I'm just putting it all together and saying this is a tough call. Do you have a coaching program that you have put in place to assist women with this?
Yes, actually, from this research, both for the book as well as my continued research and my dissertation, I've developed a consulting program that I call Transformative Wellness. So I use these types of concepts in order to help women reframe the way that they think about their bodies, the way they think about exercise and nutrition, in a way that makes it a more comfortable lifestyle rather than something that they feel pressured to do, or that they have to deprive themselves.
Mm. Do you have a website, a URL?
I do. My website is in infancy stages. It is www.conquerwellness.com, conquer with a K instead of a C.
All right. Okay, very good. Next question. The path you and your co-authors chose to overcome the death world of addiction and self-injury was through manifesting personal power through physical exercise. Would you say the internal personal power gained through weightlifting acted to reestablish an equilibrium of sorts by counterbalancing external cultural pressures?
So each of us discussed the idea of gaining personal power through physical exercise. And in the case of my colleague Lori, weightlifting became a way to overcome substance addiction. In the case of Dagmara, yoga helped her feel a sense of personal power in a time of academic pressure. However, in my phenomenon, where middle-aged women risk their health and safety exercising in pursuit of the ideal body image, there are elements of pressure, the pressure to be young and attractive, as well as personal power, like exercising to be a way to feel in control of their aging bodies. Yet they have not overcome their death worlds. They are currently living in a death world. As you previously mentioned, quoted from our chapter, a transformation of thought, one in which women put their own well-being first, would allow them to move from a death world to a life world. And I say that that is one way that they can overcome their death world of self-injury.
Okay. One last question, Jennifer. In your view, what impact do you believe your new book, Death Worlds to Life Worlds, will have on public dialogue?
So I hope that my contribution to the book Death Worlds to Life Worlds causes women to rethink how they approach exercise and nutrition. Our Western culture promotes the idea of deprivation as being necessary to achieving an ideal body. And as we discussed earlier, the word diet alone is correlated with restriction. So, however, viewing health in a broader way and thinking in terms of nourishment, it's not only healthier, but it's kinder and more sustainable. And the body positivity movement is making progress. The intent of the movement is to encourage women to be happy with who they are. And to some extent, that also sends another message that any shape is okay and that women should embrace themselves even if they are overweight. And I'm not talking just a little, right? But like, I have a differing opinion because having excessive body fat is has well documented damaging health consequences. So I feel a better way to frame body positivity is more in the way women perceive how they view their bodies and consequently their health. As we discussed earlier, if a woman thinks about her decisions and how those decisions are either nourishing or depriving, then she is more likely to have a better relationship with herself, her body, and at the same time, it promotes, optimal health of mind, body. So my hope is that Death Worlds to Life Worlds encourages women to have a healthy relationship with themselves and their bodies.
Hmm. Well, you certainly added to the public dialogue about this, and I hope that it gets some widespread audience. More and more people need to hear the work you've done. It certainly wasn't off the top of your head, and you've done a wonderful in-depth piece. Thanks for coming on today.
And thank you, Dr. Dave.